In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark. Early in the morning, as Jesus was on his way back to the city, he was hungry. Seeing a fig tree by the road, he went up to it, but found nothing on it except leaves. Then he said to it, "May you never bear fruit again." Immediately the tree withered up. When the disciples saw this, they were amazed and asked, "How did the fig tree wither so quickly?" Jesus replied, "Truly I tell you, if you have faith and do not doubt, not only can you do what was done to the fig tree, but you can say to the mountain, 'Go throw yourself in the sea,' and it will be done. If you believe, you will receive what you ask for in prayer. Therefore, I tell you, the kingdom of God will be taken away from you and given to a people who will produce its fruit." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
So that last line, therefore I tell you, the kingdom of God will be taken away from you and given to a people who will bear fruit. That actually, there's a chapter in between, but I edited that out. He's saying that to the high priest. But that's right, because I want to start with that as an example of why Jesus hates fig trees. No, actually, what God hates is when we don't produce fruit. That's the point of that. And the fig tree is a symbol of the church, and the church wasn't producing, so God curses it. Christ curses it. And then just in actually a few verses, he'll say to the high priest, "Therefore I tell you, the kingdom of God will be taken away from you and given to a people who will produce fruit." Now, sounds like an odd way to start, but so I just want actually to talk about this book, Rebuilt, because I have to admit, it's not the best written book. I've only read half of it, but I personally want to have these open discussions on it because this is something I really care about. As a missionary priest, I don't know if you know that, but I was a missionary priest, liked working in Central America, but then the truth is, and this sounds awful, but the truth is this, they pulled me out to do fundraising, which that means going to parishes in the United States, which is important because, shepherds got to buy hay. And that was incredibly insightful. That was actually, sadly, the most shocking part of my time away, because I got to go to parishes all over the United States. And what I found out is the Catholic Church is hurting incredibly. And I could repeat this story. I was in this church in New Jersey, right? Typical, I'm there for all the weekend masses. We had more people at daily mass than they had in their entire weekend. And not only that, it was like a nursing home. It was so sad. And I was like, well, and this is in New Jersey somewhere, and I was like, I guess there's no people or something like that. I don't know. Maybe it's a small town. We go to I don't know what you call it, wharf or docks where all the restaurants, huge number of people, kids running all over the place. And I remember thinking, what the hell's wrong with that parish? That why is it loaded here and not in the parish? And I could repeat that story time and time and time again. And then I was also in St. Louis, and I was in this really old parish in St. Louis. I forget how old, but I was stunned at like a couple hundred years old. That'd be impossible. But the priest there was ready to retire, and he was old and tired. Really good guy. But once again, nobody was at Mass. And when you were driving back, he was talking about, well, now, that convent, the diocese sold that convent, and the diocese sold this, and everything up for religion was up for sale. And the parishes were dying. And how, there was a cardinal at that time, how the cardinal was funding the diocese was actually by selling off all this property. And he said, and the cardinal was closing all these churches. And I said, well, why is the cardinal closing these churches? He says, well, all the Catholics moved away. Now, at that point, there's an obvious question. You mean all the people moving in weren't ever converted? And you're there for 100 years? You never made any converts? And like, there's this huge warning bell that's going off on me. And then one of our parishioners gave me this from the Wall Street Journal. Did any of you guys read this article the last week in the Wall Street Journal? Nobody reads? But it was called Cardinal, Please Spare This Church. And the church is this church, St. Thomas More in New York. It has a vibrant community. Its school is full. It has a waiting list to get on the school. The church is packed every Sunday. And they're selling it. Why? Because the Cardinal Dolan needs money. The church is broke. And now, I've been to New York. I've been to Paris. I haven't been to Paris, but I've been to New York, and like I went on vacation there with my sister, and I went to Sunday Mass. Once again, dead parish. There's more people at our daily Mass than there were on the Sunday Mass I went to. And they make a point in this article. Well, our parish is vibrant. People travel, get on subways and drive just to come to this parish. Why are you closing our parish? And the basic line is, it's in a good location. They can get a couple $1 million. And so the woman writing the article says, sell your mansion. You get hundreds of millions for that. Now, the point being is that if you're selling off your property, your church is dying, right? Why aren't we making converts? And when I was traveling around the United States, you look around and you kind of think, the Catholic Church is in this huge problem. In many parts, we're dying off. Our parishes are becoming nursing homes. And like, Holy Apostles is the exception to the rule. We really are. Even like, not just Holy Apostles, but all of Boise. Our churches, well, except for one church, one parish, our churches are full. They really, you know what I mean? We're not nursing homes. And the sad part is, and this, we're talking about decades, you never really find any direction from the diocese itself. And I'm going to make this outlandish statement, and it's my opinion. The bishops don't care. And I know that sounds rude, and I'm not saying they're bad people. I'm not saying they're evil, bad people. But like Bishop Mike told this story. He said, and he says this to a gathering of priests. He says, I know what parish life is like. He said, I remember when I was a young priest, a parochial vicar, and I'd come downstairs and the housekeeper would have made breakfast, and all three of us would sit around the table discussing what we're going to do that day. And I was like, housekeeper? No one in Idaho has a housekeeper. No one walks downstairs and a housekeeper is making you breakfast. No priests have breakfast together. If you don't have an appointment with me that day, you're not getting in to see me. You know, I reserve 1 hour for emergencies. But if you want an appointment, you just don't walk into the office and say, I want to see Father Len. I will give you 2 minutes standing outside in the hallway. No, I really will. I'm not kidding. You have to call 2 weeks ahead, or at least a week ahead, for me to fit you in. I'm not sitting around a dining room table trying to decide that day what to do. And they're so removed from what's happening. And I know that's a huge criticism. But here's the thing. We're going to be critical in the first 2 sessions of reviewing this book. And the reason why I like the book is that, you know, it's kind of the first priest that published a book that says the emperor has no clothes. As a Catholic Church, we have to wake up. And if you're looking for direction from the leadership doesn't know. Do you know we had to fill out a form? Well, when I say we, I mean Patty Blasek. Had to fill out a form for the new bishop coming in that says, please give us a profile of your parish. So we did that, and then one of the questions was, what is one of the weaknesses of your parish? So, I'm kind of smarky. And so I said, Patty, this is what I want you to write. One of our weaknesses is that we are 10% of the Catholics in Idaho. And the bishop has never been here on a Sunday to visit our people. He only comes for confirmation. And God bless the bishop. Bishop Mike was a very sweet man. He really was. But once the priests were all together and we were saying, what does the bishop do on the weekends? Because I thought he was at St. John's. And the pastor at St. John's says, no, unless it's Christmas and Easter, he doesn't show up. And so we had to ask. He says it in his home. The bishop has no idea what goes on in a parish. And I'm not meaning to criticize Bishop Mike, but most of all the bishops are there. When I was pastor of St. Mark's, I got this award for outstanding places in the United States to worship, be they Catholic or Protestant. I didn't receive one message from the diocese. Holy Apostles is one of the highest places where we have converts to the Catholic Church. And I don't know, Mary, have you received any? I never received any recognition from the diocese, except for a bishop
in Los Angeles.
Except for this bishop in L.A. No, he called and wanted to know how we get so many converts. And you know what he asked? Could you email him a copy of our syllabus? It's not the syllabus. It's the community. Life draws life. People draw people into the church. And they just seem to miss it. And so, as I said, we're going to be critical in the first two sessions. Because, we're at halfway. But the first part is criticism. So just to explain this. First, we're going to examine what's wrong with our theology of church. Next section, what are we doing wrong on Sunday? So we're keeping Sunday separate. And then the next two sessions is strategies to improve the Catholic Church. And I'm not taking on all the Catholic Church. I just want to focus on the borders of my parish. And Tim Ritchie used to joke. He says, all I care about is the borders of my parish. And he was joking with me about that. So I come here after being a missionary, and Tim says, only concern yourself with the borders of your parish. Because if you try and take on all the problems in Boise or the Catholic Church or the world, you'll lose. And so when we take on the problems in this section and next section of how we can do church better, if it's outside our parish boundaries, you've just lost me at that point. Does that make sense? So I don't want to change Rome or the diocese. I want our parish to be the best. And so the guy, and really I don't want to lecture the whole time. I want feedback and people to start thinking about how to do church better. But he starts thinking about it. And the joke is, and this cracks me up, the priest, I don't think he really wanted to be a parish priest. It doesn't say that, but I met these guys and I don't dislike him. One of my best friends in the seminary, he wanted to become the bishop. He wanted to go to Rome. He wanted to make contacts there. He had a well-orchestrated plan, and he wanted to be the assistant to the bishop so that he could then go to Rome. Good guy, but he said he didn't want to. And there's certain priests I met who just don't really want to do parish work. I don't care. God bless him. I don't think that's evil either. But I actually suspect he's one of these because usually, my degree's in liturgy, which nobody likes that one. But anybody who says, no, but you'll notice this. Priests that get a degree in ecclesiology, that means usually they want to be a bishop. Two of my friends, they went and got degrees in ecclesiology. Why? They want to be a bishop. So I'm just saying, I suspect he wanted to be a bishop, except he jokes. The degree in ecclesiology is theology of church, didn't teach him how to run a parish. And that part I love, because I had 2 masters when I was ordained a priest in theology, and I go to my first parish, and it's a dead parish, and the pastor spends very little time in the office, and I'm sitting there not knowing how to be a priest. You know what I mean? And it's kind of funny, because you know who taught me how to be a priest my first year? The secretary. She was brilliant. She was absolutely brilliant. But I'd go to her and I'd say, how do you do a baptism? And she was really funny, and she'd say, you see that clock? She says, I get off at 5 o'clock. I said, oh, got it. She's not taking responsibility. But she'll tell me, and she did the whole year long, tell me how to run things. And the one who actually wasn't a dead parish, it was pretty good, but she ran the entire parish. She was really the pastoral and administrative. The priest was AOL. He was an absentee landlord. And my only point is that theology doesn't prepare you on how to run a community. And so anyhow, so this guy probably really doesn't want to become a priest, and he gets his parish, and the parish is dead. And so he does, if you read the book, he does a survey, and in case you didn't read the book, do you know what the number one reason people went to that church was? Convenient parking. I mean, don't you love it? Convenient parking. And he makes a statement that it takes a lot of work to stand still. That's a line from, what book is that? Alice in Wonderland. It takes a lot of work. And, I actually came to that conclusion when I was a priest in McCall, because I was kind of bored, and there's not that much work to do in McCall, and I tried to do a lot of work, and really, nothing really happened, so I went skiing. But what amazed me is that it does take a lot of work to stand still. So in the story, and this is really great, in the story of the parish, he did try a lot of things, but it didn't have any change, right? He tried to do these community events, and I do that too. The reason why I have the parties in the summertime, I'm a high introvert. I don't like being in front of people. I do it so that we can create community. So he was doing a lot of that stuff too. But the problem was, and this just was a great insight, the problem in the United States is this culture of retail religion, where they're playing this game of retail religion. And the youth minister, I don't know if you read that in the book, he did all this activity, breakneck speed, and ski trips, and movies, and all this other stuff. And the guy says it wasn't a religious education program, it was a religious entertainment program. But it wasn't really making him devoted to the faith or Christ. So then they put all this money in the music program, still didn't work, all these lectures and entertainment. And I love the story where they're having these cocktails and free dinners, right? Free dinners. Do you remember that story? Free dinners. And a woman comes up to complain about the free meal she's receiving. And at that point, he just kind of loses it. And the problem, and this is the point of the problem is that they gave in to the consumer culture. And he says it's great if you're doing retail to work on that model where you're making money. But if you run a church by working on consumer culture, you've actually just created more demanding customers, and the demands will never end. You haven't created church. And do you mind if I just read some of this? Anyhow.
What page is that?
I'm on page 10, where he says, he's quoting this author, Rodney Clapp. The consumer is schooled in insatiability. He or she is never to be satisfied, at least not for long. The consumer is taught that persons consist basically of unmet needs that can be required and commodified goods and experience. Accordingly, the consumer should think first and foremost of himself or herself and meeting his or her felt needs. And if you notice at the very end when Father Michael was talking, he mentions that. He said, I was wasting my time. It just wasn't the ingratitude when the woman was complaining about the free food. It was a lack of purpose and the resulting of a lack of effect. We were working as hard as we could and in a non-sustainable way. It never made any difference. There was never any difference in anyone after than before. Now I understood why my predecessor's doormat read, "Go away." And like that really, I have to tell you, as a priest, that was like a huge exclamation point, because I said, that's true. You can do two things in your priesthood. Now, this is not true. There is a third way, which I want to spend these classes exploring. In your priesthood, you can work like hell and get nowhere. And believe it or not, I've done that. Or you can just turn your parish into a gas station. And I have to tell you, that's very common among some priests, that really just show up for Sunday and don't demand anything Monday through Friday, because you can either work yourself to death and get nowhere, or take Monday through Friday off. And you think I'm kidding, but like my first pastor, he was never there. It's not like he was traveling, but he was always, somewhere else than the parish. He wanted, and this was a great insight the secretary made. Secretary, she wasn't bitter, but she said, he wants us to be a gas station, and we want it to be a church. So she was really the pastor. Does that make sense? And believe me, there are parishes here in Idaho where the pastor, his whole goal is to become a gas station parish. That basically he's going to show up on Sunday, and that's about it. And the reason why is that it's a lot easier than breaking your neck going nowhere. So I hope I haven't disconcerted you completely yet. But the problem is, if you give in to the consumer culture, you will always lose. And the problem is, America is a very consumer culturated people. Like I've had parishioners say, I pay your salary. You know, that's an interesting ecclesiology. You know, that this is a country club that they pay membership and you kiss their ass. And what I gotta say is that's a very dangerous, because they're no longer a church, they're no longer a mission. That's all it is. Now, I probably want to take a break because I want to read some stuff, but I want your reactions to my rather incendiary comments. Any? Am I dominating too much, Pat? Okay, so.
I'm not allowed to talk in public.
But that's the state of the Catholic Church. We're in a make or break situation. But in chapter 1, where he says church is not easy, he asks the question, what did we do wrong? And he lists it out. So it's really not a very complicated book. But I just want to go over these, if you don't mind rereading. What did we do wrong? We assumed if we did more and did it better, people would grow in their maturity and commitment. Not in a consumer society. You've just created unsatiable demands. Does that make sense? Any comments, or move to the next one? 2, we thought if we did more and did it better, people would automatically give more money. Guess what? That's not true. They paid their dues and you're supposed to tap dance. 3, if we did more and did it better, we took for granted that people would automatically get involved and help out. No, not in a consumer, not when you're doing retail religion. 4, we look to our stalwart churchgoers, senior citizens, as our natural allies as we try to move forward. That's actually kind of famous. Kind of think, because I have to admit, the senior citizens, they are the most devoted Catholics. They really are. But the problem is, they want things to stay often just the way they've been. And does that make any sense, or you want to argue? Or? Oh, go ahead.
What more is he talking about doing to make the parish grow, though?
Oh, what he was doing was putting everything in, better music. We'll hire a professional musician. We'll have these luncheons. We'll have education classes. None of that was going on before, these socials.
Did he ask people to come?
Yeah, and they came and complained about the free food. But and this is kind of sneaky. I kind of, when I'm here, I didn't like the sacristy when I got here. And, Charlie?
We never complained about the food at these parties. Because they're running out of the wine.
The booze has gone dry. Then immediately I do have to say, of Charlie's generation, it is kind of funny because once the booze runs dry, all you get in your car, the party's over by 8:30. Love it!
My wife and I have been in youth ministry for almost 40 years now, and one of the things that I think is symptomatic is the idea that kids are the future of the church. Mm-hmm. And I tell them, no, you're the now of the church.
You're not the future, you are the church.
You are the church. And the church in Australia is one generation away from dying. And that's because young people...
No, the church all over the world is one generation.
I don't know about the world, but I do know Australia.
I know Europe.
Yeah. But if we don't reach out to kids and evangelize them as the life of the church, then we are going to die.
Okay, I have to challenge you. I disagree. I think not reach out to kids. We have to reach out to all people.
Well, yeah.
Everyone.
But if you want to get the parents involved, reach out to the kids.
Yeah, that's true. You get kids, you get parents usually.
Yeah, absolutely. And we need a school.
I agree. But do you see how, going back, the fourth mistake, that sometimes one of the problems is the parishioners who refuse to change? That's point number 4. And they get upset. Like I was going to tell you, when I moved here, I didn't like the sacristy, the sanctuary. So I removed what I called that chicken fence. Obviously the tabernacle. And I painted the wall red. And I painted the wall red just to highlight the area of the sacristy versus the rest of the church. And also to show that there's a new Boston Catholic. But, it's just paint. It cost a couple $100. I got a couple letters from parishioners saying that they will refuse to give any more because of the painting of the wall. And, I'm kind of a mean person, so my attitude was good riddance. Good riddance, because I learned this at the U of I, that sometimes a party is better when you invite the right people, and sometimes a party gets even better when some people leave. So good. Okay, so number 5. Number 5, little did we appreciate how detached the second and third generations of demanding consumers have grown. That is really true. A lot of people, the second and third generations, really, they want the church for, as he said, adornments. That to come on Easter and Christmas and First Communion, but it's not, and Mother's Day, but it's not really a way of life. You know what I mean? And I think that's very true. 6, beyond the basic consumption, we didn't understand how marginalized the whole enterprise of faith and religion had become in the lives of our parishioners. I think that is very, very true. The basic thing is this. Religion really is under attack. It really is, just belonging to religion. And you had this odd thing of, years ago, huge amounts of people were Catholic. And then all these evangelical churches started. And the book points this out, but they've done studies on this. You know all these evangelical churches? Do you know they're filled mostly with lax Catholics? Okay, now here's the interesting part. Evangelical churches are now starting to decline and die out. And the generation that you think would replace them, religion is a joke. Religion is a joke in the greater culture. The hugest growth was atheists. You know, now atheists are on campus trying to make converts. Atheists have become missionaries to becoming atheists. I'm not kidding. I mean missionaries. They become evangelical on getting converts to atheism. Look at all the movies in Hollywood. Religion is treated as a joke. You know, when they put a little crucifix up, they're making religion a joke to the next generation. Or, I love the book Unbroken. Anybody read the book Unbroken? I don't know if you noticed it, but religion seemed to play a heavy role in that.
Yes.
Did you see the movie? Yes. I know, I like the movie, don't get me wrong. But where the hell was God? You know, they're in the boat and he hears angels. They edited that out. They edited out all the stuff that deals with God or religion. And it becomes a story just about how he's undaunted, which is great. But the thing that really changed him, that made him unbroken, was really his prayer life. Believe, religion is under attack, and I just think, like him, we should wake up and know exactly who our competition is. So that's my opinion, and his. Any disagreements or? 7. Despite our best efforts, we are not reaching our student population, as you said. 8. We didn't understand how profoundly uninterested the non-church-going population had grown, how distrustful of any outreach efforts we made, how cynical they had become to all organized religion. Very true. 9. We were not turned towards God. We're not relying on His leadership. We're not looking to go where He was blessing. Okay, so that's his major things, which I think are all true. They're a little depressing. And it is a little depressing, and that's why I think the church doesn't want to look at it. But these really are the things that he did wrong, and it's the problems that we're facing. Now, just want to, once again, take people's pulse, opinions, objections. Okay, go ahead. Miss Beth. Oh, good, I'll get some coffee. Keep talking, Beth. I know you're...
Talk loud enough because we have people taking notes.
Okay, I can talk loud. I see a real parallel with what happened in St. Vincent's de Paul, just for myself, because you're automatically a member of the council, which is over us. We have 10 conferences. And I just felt like I was spinning my wheels a little bit, working on the council, and I thought, no, I'm just going to go back and we're just going to work on our conference. We're just going to do right here where the rubber meets the road in the conference, and that made all the difference. I'm not saying I don't care about the council, but it wasn't where our focus really was supposed to be anyway. And just working at the conference level, it made all the difference. And it's kind of what you said about Father Ritchie, worrying about the boundaries. Our boundaries are our neighborhood and our zip codes. And once we made the adjustment pretty fast, and it was wonderful. It took the pressure off and it put it where it was supposed to be. So I kind of agree with that.
And somebody else say yes.
Well,
Could you speak up because you don't have the best voice?
I know. I have two 20-something children, and they are going to Catholic church, but they shopped around for the church that they could relate to. And one of the things both of them said was, there are not very many young people at Mass. They're either all young or families. And of course, I'm one of those that are old, so I don't notice. They noticed that people their age were not at Mass. And they went to Christmas and they went to Sunday Mass. So they had some sort of idea. And the more we talked about it, the more this good little mom who brought up her children to be so Catholic and was so proud they were going to Mass had a slap in the face. Because somewhere along the line I missed the idea that we go to Mass because of the Eucharist, not because of all the other stuff.
Yeah, no offense to your kids, they're good kids.
Oh, they're wonderful kids.
But it shows what a consumer culture they're living. They go to church to see. No, I can get what they're talking about.
Music and to get
It's retail religion.
But it's more. I almost wanted to go in the bedroom and cry.
There's no Eucharistic theology.
No.
It's retail religion.
And listening to this part, I'm going to go and buy the book because I'll better understand where they're coming from.
My rebuttal to them would be this, by the way.
Okay.
So, can I give that a rebuttal? When I was at St. Mark's and we got outstanding places to worship, this is Catholic Protestant. Anyhow, this was kind of impressive. A reporter from the New York Times flew to Boise, Idaho to interview me about what I was doing at St. Mark's. So we actually made the New York Times. And so I took him out to dinner at the... No, that's where Dr. Hebers takes me. No, it's a Piper Cub. But anyhow, he was a young man, and I asked, I said, well, just curious, are you Catholic? And he says, no, I'm Jewish, but I'm not practicing observant Jew. He says, but I'm about to get married, and my wife and I have decided that we will start going to synagogue. So I said, well, if you've never practiced Judaism, why are you practicing it now? He says, do you know what it's like to be married in New York City? Well, of course I don't. So, no. And he says, people don't, all my friends, they get married, they get divorced, they don't really believe in commitment. And if that's the case, why even get married? So my wife and I we're planning our marriage, wedding, and we're thinking, all our friends don't have much commitment towards marriage. Even when they get married, they plan on getting divorced. Now, you can say, that's not true. That is true. In my fraternity, my fraternity class, once we were asking about, we were all talking, and I remember a shocked. One of my friends saying, well, when I get married, I totally plan on cheating. So we started to all talk, and really about half of them planned on cheating. And they're not even in love yet. And my only point being is that when he said that, I know what he meant. So he said, and this was a great line, he says, my wife and I decided that we want to belong to a community that values commitment. He says, yeah, a lot of them are old people. I mean, he admitted that. In the synagogue, it's old people, but it's old people that at least once a week they'll have the same value of commitment. And so that would be my rebuttal of, well, yeah, they're old people, but it's the values you want to look at. Yeah.
With consumerism, I'm sitting at a table with a couple of consumers, myself included. I don't live in this zip code, but if I didn't come here to church, I would be de-churched. If the Catholic Church said, like some churches, you go to this facility, and so I can appreciate that, but I don't think I'm just a bystander. I think I'm a fairly active member.
Yeah, except for this reason. I see what you're getting at, but that actually is the reality. Everybody shops around for a parish, but it depends what you're shopping for. Her kids are shopping for music and all that other stuff, but and I'll tell you, she's her mimic, So I got a call from this woman from Emmett, since he mentioned this publicly from the pulpit, I'll mention it publicly here. He told this woman whose husband, she's married, but her husband been previously married, and he refuses to get an annulment, and she's Catholic. And so the priest from the pulpit told her that if she went to communion, that would be a mortal sin. Well, number one, why would you single out somebody like that? Number two, that is theologically not quite correct. But you know what I mean? And so I told her, I said, well, why don't you just, we're 20 minutes away, drive to Holy Apostles. You know, but you know, you have to kind of think, wow, I would not stay in that parish if I was her. Because there's a canon law on her side. But the priest didn't explain that. He accused her of committing a mortal sin in public. So no, why wouldn't she? So I'm not saying that you have to go, but we do believe in a consumer society where she's Catholic. But I know, this is why I mentioned this at, I think, Daily Mass, right? I don't know. I mentioned this at Daily Mass that I'm the Grinch of Christmas because, and this is true, I hate Christmas. I hate Easter. Not that I hate them theologically, but for a high introvert, you know it's going to be packed with C&E and that's fine. I'm not complaining against them. But you can't really say anything theological. You can't say anything deep. It's got to be a show of tap dancing and having them walk away saying, wasn't that nice? That's what I'm going for. But you can't be profound. You have to be, you're on stage for Christmas and Easter. Does that make sense? That's a consumer society. Does that make any sense? Not like, I'm not putting up with this.
But I think you're on stage every Sunday because that's why we all go. You know?
Well, I don't know if that's completely true. I don't know if that's completely true.
Well, I mean,
Because, how do I say this? This one parish was very alive. And another priest comes in. This priest does not plan on working more than 4 hours a day. Because there's TV to get to or something. And you know, it didn't make a big impact on the attendance of this church. And you know why? Because people at the church were devoted to each other. And, you know, I was worried the church would die. Did perfectly fine, just seasoned right through them. So, you know, yeah, a little bit, but really, you're devoted to the community and to the Eucharist. If everything's fairly well, they'll stay. You have to work to drive people out. And I try. My joke is, I try and drive the weak away. But it is a consumer society, and that's
right.
what he had to realize that he was up against.
and when we're looking for, like her children who are looking for a church, that's what draws them to, is the sermon.
Yeah.
And they're looking for their peers, but we're all old. We have our peers. So, you know, I don't...
Well, Stan is.
Stan,
Her husband. He's old. You're not.
you know, I can understand the 30, 40 age group looking...
Well, I can too, but I can understand it. I really do. But in understanding it, let's admit it. It's a consumer society. And if you're going to do church, this is what you're working with. And I think it's just wise to mention it, because as Rob mentioned, that's why you need to focus on the youth. Because if you don't, you won't get the parents. You won't get the singles. And anyhow. So on continuing naming the problem. So the next chapter on naming the problem is actually chapter 2 is Pharisees at Heart. And you can never really tell if I want to look at the book or you. But really, that actually is one of the best chapters I liked, because the problem is the Catholic Church in some ways have become Pharisees. Do you remember the problem with the fig tree? Jesus sees the fig tree, it's producing no fruit, so he curses it. We're meant to produce fruit. We are commanded by Christ to be missionaries. To be missionaries. Everybody in our parish boundaries, we should want to be part of our community. And yet, as a church, what do we worry about? But translations of consubstantial and, look at like the last 10 years. We worry about translations. Now, don't get me wrong, I can see translations are right, but they're god-awful translations. And just on the books of the translations, are the prayers that we use at Mass alone, you realize that costs the Catholic Church millions of dollars. If you take every parish and every chapel throughout the world that has to change their translations on books that cost $100 each, we just spent millions on these silly prayers. And I'm all for liturgy, don't get me wrong. But you do this and worry about consubstantial and all this prancing around when the church is dying. This is where we put our energy. And I just consider it a point of Pharisaicalism. That's why I love Pope Francis's number 7 on sins of the Vatican that he gave at Christmas time, where he basically says, just because you're prancing around in long robes does not make you mystics. And he's from South America. Do you know in South America alone, the total number of people who have left the Catholic Church in 1 year is equal to those who left when Luther broke away from the Catholic Church? You talk about the Protestant revolt, right? If you study history, just those who are walking away into nothingness. Brazil used to be 90% Catholic, and now it's something like 60% Catholic. And my point being is the church is dying. And you're worried about translations? Now, the point in Pharisee is this. Remember, Jesus curses the fig tree. Either, and I said this when I went around the United States and seeing all these parishes, some parishes were really alive. Other parishes were nursing homes. And I'd say, listen, it comes down to two things. Either you're growing or you're dying. There's no in between. You're either growing or dying. That's what we are as a Catholic Church. And so Christ gave us, and he mentions this, and I'm going to tell now. Christ gave us a couple commandments. Not that hard. One was you must love with all your heart, mind, and soul. He gave us the sacraments. Do this in memory of me. And the last thing he said is what? I actually can't tell you. Everybody's talking. What? No, I already got love. Love was just before the Last Supper. Go make disciples. The last thing he says is go baptize everyone to all the ends of the earth in the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Go make disciples. And the problem is, I would say in the last, 50, 100 years, that commandment of Christ was meant for Marynals or, people out in Africa or, missionaries to God-forsaken Minnesota. But what about our parish boundaries? Are we a church that makes disciples? Is that one of our top 3 commands from Christ? Or isn't that Sunday after Sunday, things happen as I want, as I'm comfortable having? Does that make sense? And the problem is he inherits this church that his parish. They're not concerned about making disciples. That's the problem. And so he starts to ask, what's keeping our parish from growing? And some of it is just the inflexibility. And the shocking part of the book is that he's basically agreed that, yes, some people who are inflexible, let them leave if they want to leave. But remove all those barriers that are preventing growth. God's will is that things grow. That is the commandment from Genesis. Be fruitful and multiply. When God says that, he he is not talking about sex, sorry to tell you. He's not talking about sex. He's talking about life. And Christ makes that a commandment for us. We're supposed to make disciples. So if you're not fruitful, if you're not growing, maybe it's because we're not being faithful to the mission of Christ that Christ gave us. Like the fig tree, Christ will remove his blessing. So that, it really is a very important part of what it means to be Catholic. And you don't really find that in most parishes. Most parishes, they're just concerned about, that's like I'll be honest, this is like fingernails on a chalkboard to me when I hear the word orthodoxy. No, it's not because I don't care about orthodoxy. But people are more concerned about quote-unquote orthodoxy and this Latin phrase and blah, 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 that they don't even understand. They don't even have a degree in theology. And they're all bent up about, are you Orthodox? I'm not sure if you're Orthodox. They're not concerned if their parish is sticking true that we are making disciples. That you should be able to walk into our church and know this is a church that wants everybody to be Catholic. We have such a good thing, the bread of life, the Word of God. We want everybody to be part of this. Not because we want it, because Christ wanted it, and Christ demanded it. So he wrote that they started to have to think, what were the barriers? And he said, quote unquote, strategically, the most important decision we ever made was to go out and aggressively learn from growing churches. That's the most important decision they made. And so there is like this award that Stewardship gives of best practices. I always want to know what they are, to see if we can import them here. The big insight, and this is a strange part, his big insight, I think, in this part of the book, was stop trying to fix problems. You're fixing small problems. Instead of trying to fix small problems, what he decided to do was change what it meant to be church. Now, what it meant to be church is that we want everybody to be a part of God's family. That's what he changed. And just FYI, his church now, Nativity, it was a dead parish. Now it's hugely alive. I mean, if you check out the website and stuff, God, it's amazing. They're busting at the seams. He didn't fix the problems. He changed what it meant to be church. That was the first thing he did. Okay, I know I'm taking up too much time. Patty, your opinion?
About the whole thing, I'm optimistic because I think as a parish it's good to get a lot of feedback from parishioners versus just, hearing about like what goes on in staff meetings. But I also think with a new bishop coming in, this is an excellent time to be doing some self-reflection, and I bet he's going to be doing the same rebuilds in the diocese.
Well, he may not know it, but I think he'd be open for it.
Yes.
But I do think, I think we got a great parish. I really do. Even Tim Ritchie, when I was coming back, said, Holy Apostles is the flagship of the diocese, and the bishop doesn't know it. We got a great parish. But I think he's right. The first thing we've got to do is change church. The church, big part of church is we want everybody to be disciples.
And then in response to Leanne, my own kids, they want to go somewhere where maybe they can connect with other young people.
Yeah, that's
when
true.
we moved here 20 years ago, we had no family. I had to start relying on church people. I had my family back east. If I wanted to talk Catholic, just go over to my parents' house. But here I needed to kind of really get involved in church life. Unfortunately, I went a little farther than I thought.
But no, I used to always say this, life attracts life. Life attracts life, and death attracts death. And so if we got a lot of life going on here, we'll get more people. And the best way to get more people Catholic and more life is that if you're excited, lo and behold, your neighbor might get excited. You know what I mean? And then they'll draw their kids and I'm getting more coffee, and their kids. But understand, we are up against this society that mocks church as something for stupid people. But, you know, I think they can do that all they want, but people, life draws life. If you're excited about church, you'll get other people. If you're only excited that, you know, we're more orthodox than the neighbor parish, who wants to get in that argument? What non-Catholic is attracted to that?
Father, do you think we have to buy into the consumerism?
No, not at all. He didn't. He decided not to. His church is busting at the seams because one of the things they decide to do, they were buying into the consumer culture and say, listen, we will work twice as hard. We'll have dinners. We'll have movies. We'll have ski trips. They tried that. It didn't work. And that's when he loses it, when the woman complains about the free food she's receiving. And, you know, the change is saying this. The change is saying, no, we're not a consumer church. You know, you belong to this church. You belong to a family, and you're part of it. And we pitch in together.
But do we have to make church more available to the young people? Do we have to have evening, weekly masses?
You know, though, can we save that question until we get to Sunday? Because I really think that's an important question. But, like, I actually think that's part of hospitality. When you say available, translate the word hospitality. But I think that's an important question. I just want to cover that next time.
It seems like there are two categories of things going on. There's what we do, what we do in the church. And in doing those things, we can either do it till we're exhausted, because it's the same people doing. Or underneath it, it's the being that we are that causes us to want to do. And I think in being, that being, which is kind of elusive, like how are you being with it, that draws people to want that you're being
Yeah, I see where you're going.
involved.
Yeah, that is a problem. That, let's face it, you always have a remnant, a small percentage, that does everything. You know why we have such a hard time getting ushers at Mass? It's because one person said in the service, well, I would. But what I noticed is that if you're an usher at Mass, you're an usher at every Mass, every weekend. You know, it's not like everybody takes their turns. We're so hard for ushers. It's always the same people. And the problem is, that's a consumer society. I show up. Like I had this gal that wanted, she had little kids and she was divorced. She was divorced and she came to me and she's looking for a Catholic church. She's on welfare and she's looking for a church and she has kids, but she needs free babysitting. And I said, well, you know, we do have Kids Word, right? Where your kids can go to Kids Word, but you'll have to also volunteer in that. And I might have got that wrong. Did I get that wrong? But so anyhow, I said they might ask you to be with the kids one of the weekends. She says, well, I don't want to do that. And I thought, you're probably not best for our parish. You know what I mean? Like, she just wanted to receive, but that's part of what we're fighting. But so we want to invite people into the church, but we want to give them a definition of church that, you know, you're not a consumer, you're a family. But Mary, do you have anything to say? I'm going to pick on you to make me.
Oh, good. No, I'm very excited to see some freshness in our parish. That's it.
Oh.
What's your definition?
I can give you fresh air.
Always
look for that.
That woman, we meet that person every day. And to me, that's my challenge, to show her a different way. Accept her, bring her in, but show her a different way. Yes, bring your kids to Kid Word. And hopefully I can change her rather than turn her off.
Yeah, I didn't mean to say I turned her off, but I just remember thinking, ooh.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, we want to be a growth parish, but yeah, we do want to kind of free people from their consumer religious retail. Yeah.
So one of the things that I found kind of surprising was I spent my whole career in customer service, and I didn't really think about it in terms of the church. And the things he complained about is what you get in customer service. The more you give away for free, the more they want. There's no value for it, and the demand gets higher and higher until my people, we couldn't meet the demand without hiring more people, but then, of course, we couldn't hire more people
Because you don't have the money and.
and it was a vicious cycle, and customers were absolutely out of control. It's like the inmates were running the asylum after a while. And the other comment is, to your point, I came from New Jersey, and Howard back there, and you're absolutely right. It is very, very sad to see how it's dying, and I didn't even realize that as much until I came here. There's a huge difference from this parish to where I came from back east.
So I don't want to end on a sad note, but I will say this. So if you read the book or listen to the podcast, the youth minister tells this great story that they decided, and this is, by the way, where we're going. First, I want to name the problems and then come up with a strategy. But they came up with 5 core values for ministry. So I'm getting a little ahead of myself. I just don't want to end on a down note, if that's okay. But number 1 is that they decided that they were going to be growth-orientated. That they decided at parish that they were going to take Christ's command of go make disciples of the world. And that they always want more growth, not only with membership, but within the membership. That's actually going to become key in a couple of days, that there's got to be more personal growth and growth as a community. That you got to challenge everybody. But they decided they wanted to have a community that was seeker-sensitive, that they wanted to be a growing community. And the youth ministers tell the story about, oddly enough, and I thought this was a great story, the youth minister tells a story about when he makes this change of, well, why wouldn't I want everybody Catholic? It actually fired up his faith, and he was the youth minister. Where, he says, communities that are seeker-sensitive become very sensitive about making their faith as best as possible. And I just kind of thought that was very. Does that make any sense, or did I lose you guys on that one? That one of the big steps, one of their core values was hospitality. They want to be a growing church, which means we want to grow ourselves. And they keep making this joke about Timonium Tim. Did you read that part? Yeah. And we should ask ourselves that. Timonium is, I guess, the county they live in Baltimore. City. It's a city? Yeah. Supposedly it's a city. I still think it's a county.
Right outside of Baltimore.
Sorry, got that wrong. But so I was actually thinking, if one of our 5 values is going to be hospitality, being a seeker community, what name should we give the person that we're seeking? The lost. Now I know I'm getting ahead of myself, but this is what we're going to talk about next time. Who's the lost? And by the lost, I mean the person who's not going to church. Who's a good person, blah, blah, blah. Does that make any sense? So they decided they're going to be a seeker-sensitive one, and it fired up their faith. So there was Timonium Tim. I was thinking something that rhymes with Ada County, like Andoni Ada County. So, no, that's anyhow.
About Meridian Mike.
Yeah.
Yep.
We are talking about it.
Because they're not all Meridians.
Yeah, because they're not all Meridians. They're Eagle, too. So I was going to go Ada County.
Okay.
Does
Ada
that make
County
any sense?
Aaron.
Yeah, Aaron can either be a girl's name or boy's name. Ada County Aaron. Ada Al. Yeah, that just.
That's us.
So actually, that's just the first section. Feedback, is that okay? Or I know we're ending on. We just looked at critical things, but I think you have to if you want to find growth.
Can we clarify one thing? That I wasn't the woman that called you because I'm very
No.
I came here before you did.
Right. No, Albert's willing to get an annulment.
Susie figures out how to write a check, pay for it.
And drive the car.
And drive what? Yeah.
I would just say, I think we should have a name for a man and a woman.
Well, that's actually why I like Ada County Aaron, because Aaron can be spelled with 2 A's or an E. You know, it could be a girl's name or a boy's name. All right.
What is the rate of growth at Public Homes right now? Do you do an annual
No, I don't know.
increase percentage?
The question would be rate of growth and rate of leaving, too.
It's about even.
Yeah, it should be the same number. I can tell you, they're leaving, the rate of growth is down because.
It's about the same number, I would think, to be honest. Mary said that. I think it is.
It's about even.
Which is not good because the population of Meridian is growing.
Yeah.
So where's Aaron?
So, Father, would you tell our parish boundaries?
Our parish boundaries are everything this side of Cloverdale, and then Eagle and Meridian.
So, yeah, it's Cloverdale to Canada, Victory to Horseshoe Bend, right?
Yes.
It's huge.
It's a really strange shape if you really think about it. So. Well, it's better than having whose parish boundaries. All right, so let's end in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Almighty God, we ask you to bless our parish. May our love